Sometimes I get down the YouTube wormhole of watching guys like Eliminate, Bishu and Bunting creating the absolutely most disgusting, stankiest dubstep bass sounds ever known to humanity, and you know, I get FOMO. I want to be the one providing you with such blessed and wholesome content. But then, invariably I remember that I pigeonholed myself into being a dollars channel in which I use mostly samplers. The YouTube algorithm would shit its pants if I deviate from this incredibly small niche that I carved for myself. And so in this video I thought that I would try and recreate those incredible sounds in the most powerful sampler that I own, at least in terms of sound design, which is the Elektron Digitakt. In order to do that, the first thing that I did was actually exporting some bass notes from Vital. Vital is a soft synth that actually has some really cool and aggressive wavetables and oscillators. I exported some very low register notes with no effects nor filters added to them. Maybe I just added a bit of movement in the wavetable itself. The mindset here was to keep these sounds as simple as possible in order to then use the Digitakt's excellent filter, LFOs and envelopes in order to make some, you know, wobbles and wobs and growls and all of that. Which sounds pretty straightforward, yeah? The problem is that I don't get the LFO page on the Digitakt. I just don't get it. Most LFOs have a speed knob and a sync switch. If you turn the sync on, the values on the speed knob automatically snap to set values like 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, etc, etc. If you turn the sync off, your speed knob expresses values in hertz. You select the destination, meaning the parameter you want to affect. You turn up the depth, and that's it. It makes perfect sense, right? Right. Now, on the other hand, let's have a look at how the Digitakt handles things. You've got the destination. Okay, let's select cutoff, for example. Good. You have depth. Okay, let's turn it up like halfway through. All seems to be working fine here. Now, let's get to the confusing part. You have speed and multiplier. If we try and move the speed knob around, there seems to be no rhyme or reason to it. It is a bipolar knob, giving values ranging from -64 to +64, and as you can see, when you go into negative values, the wave shape actually gets inverted. But other than that, there seems to be no indication of what these values actually mean. So let's say that you want to know in practical terms what a value of like +19 means in terms of hertz or BPM or tempo. Well, that's too bad. +19 means just +19, bro. Stop being such a square, dude. And what does this multiplier thingy do? Well, it seems like it multiplies whatever speed you set by the number that's right there, but then it says BPM. And why is a BPM indication on the multiplier and not on the speed knob? Then if you just keep going for a while, there's just numbers and the BPM indication disappears. What is going on? So I guess it's time for my favorite activity right now, which is reading the manual. Alright, let's have a look. Multiplier multiplies the speed parameter by the set factor, either by multiplying the current tempo BPM settings or by multiplying a fixed tempo of 120 BPM. Okay, let's not even discuss why on earth I would need a fixed tempo of 120 BPM. I mean, either you want your LFO synced to your project's tempo or you don't. You want it to be free. So this fixed 120 BPM makes no sense to me, really. But let's focus on the important part, which is the relation to the speed knob. Multiplier multiplies the speed parameter by the set factor by multiplying the current tempo, BPM settings. Alright, let's see what the manual says about the speed knob then. Alright, speed sets the speed of the LFO. Try settings of 8, 16 or 32 to sync the LFO to straight beats. What? Like, what you mean try? Why can't you just tell me like 8 is a full bar, 16 is half a bar or whatever? Alright, let's keep reading and see if we can make sense of this all. Oh, there it is. Okay. The table below shows the LFO speed measured in whole note values. One whole note equals 16 sequencer steps in 4/4 with scale set to 1x. That is a combination of speed and mults parentheses set to a BPM value. Settings that generate a value of 1 in the table gives that the LFO will do 1 full cycle in the time it takes the sequencer to advance 16 steps. Okay, that's a lot of words, and I still believe that they overcomplicated things for no reason whatsoever, but they did provide a table at least, which I've been showing you. So yeah, so reading from the table, it seems to me that the best setting that would work for most projects is a speed of 16, because it gives you the most useful range of tempos. You get 8 bars when the multiplier is set to 1, then 4 bars, 2 bars, 1 bar, half bar, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, and so on until you get to 2K, which is 1/256th. There you go. Okay, we got the timing down now. Let's do a quick recap of the other parameters. Fade is pretty cool because it will ease the depth of your LFO, so instead of fully affecting the sound straight away, it does it with a gentle increase. Pretty cool. Also, you can do a fade in like this, but also a fade out like this. Wave and phase, are pretty self-explanatory. You have the different waveforms that you can choose from, and you can decide the phase. In order to hear what the phase knob actually does, we need to make sure that the mode is on trig. More about modes in a second. You can hear now that the phase decides what the starting point is. Simple as that. Speaking of modes, there are different LFO modes on the Digitakt. The first is free. This means that there is an LFO constantly running in the background and it's synced to the tempo. So it doesn't matter when you trigger the note, the LFO will stay on its own time. For context, let me just use a kick as a metronome. You can hear that the LFO is still synced even if my notes are not perfectly on time. When we switch to trig mode, on the other hand, you can tell that every time I trigger a note, the LFO restarts. The LFO's timing is still synced to the project's BPM, but it all depends on the timing of my triggers. Next, we have hold. What does hold mean? Well, it means that you have the LFO running in the background, and when you press a trigger, the value that the LFO is currently at will be held for however long you hold the trig. And next time you trigger a note, it's gonna assume the new value the LFO has at that time. Let me just show you. So basically it holds whatever value the LFO had at the point of triggering the note. Next you have 1, and this mode runs the LFO just once, basically kind of making it an envelope. And it works really well with this particular shape. Half is pretty much the same as 1, but of course it only plays half the envelope. And depth does what you think it does, but it's also bipolar. So if you go negative values, see, you invert the wave. So a ramp up becomes a ramp down, etc, etc. And by the way, remember speed is also bipolar, and negative values will also invert the wave. Once again, I'm asking why? Why overcomplicate things? But yeah, anyway. Okay, now that we actually found that nice little table that explains all the speed and mult values, I must admit that LFO page doesn't look as daunting as it did before. Still, I don't understand why they designed it in such a complicated fashion, but in order to play devil's advocate, I actually did try to think of a reason why. The Digitakt has 2 LFOs per voice, and you can affect LFO 1 with LFO 2. For example, you can modulate the speed of LFO 1 using LFO 2 ever so slightly, and that gives you a cool drifting effect. You can really create complicated and interesting waveforms doing this. Now, if your speed was locked to a strict BPM preset, then you can't really do it. You can only switch between, 1/8 and 1/16, or 1 bar and a half bar, etc, etc. But I mean, that's such a fringe case. If you're interested in these sorts of things, chances are that you're very much into sound design already, and you probably know what hertz are, and you're probably not using the LFO in BPM sync mode, but you're using it in free mode. But in my experience, most people want to have a pretty clear and immediate indication that their LFOs are synced to their BPM or not. And this -64 plus 64 thing is still makes no sense to me whatsoever. Anyway, it is what it is at the end of the day, and this section is super powerful in terms of straight up sound design. Remember that you can also lock all of these parameters, and you can create some complex and evolving sounds, which is what we're gonna do right now. Okay, we got this nice bass house pattern. And of course we need to add some bass. The first thing that we need to do is to choose some nice aggressive sound for our starting point. That sounds pretty nasty. Let's go to the filter section, turn the cutoff down. Let's go to the LFO now. The speed is set to 16 as we discussed earlier. Let's try and use maybe a sawtooth wave. Well, that's pretty nice, but I kind of want it to go up instead of down, because it'll give me a nice wobble. Let's go like -90 something. Yeah, that's what I wanted. I'm gonna put it in trig mode, because I find it to be the most useful. And maybe I want to adjust the multiplier as well. Yeah, that sounds about right. Let's record it. Now I want to add some different wobbles to this track number 5. We can't really use another one because, as you might know already, the Digitakt only has 8 tracks, and I've used up all of them to make the beat. So we're gonna need some parameter locking. So now I'm gonna think about what note I want and where. I want to put something in here. Maybe something that goes like wah 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 wah. So I'm gonna put a note right here on 13 and just parameter lock my way to the sound that I want. First thing I'm gonna do is go to trig and make sure that this is 4 steps long. Now the problem is that I want to sound it like wah 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 wah, and the LFO is too slow. Let's change the multiplier to BPM 128, which I believe in this case it's 1/16. See, this is what makes it confusing. It'd be much simpler if I knew already that that value was exactly what I need, instead of, having to dig the manual every time. But anyway, let me just hear it. Sounds about right, but I need to change the waveform. And possibly the depth as well, because I don't want an inverted wave, but a regular one. Yeah, that's pretty much it. One last thing, I want to change that sample. I want something a bit less aggressive, maybe like a normal sawtooth or square. Yeah, that's it. Cool, I'm gonna go for a little jam now. So in conclusion, the LFO page on the Digitakt is, pretty powerful. Maybe not enough to make me become the next worldwide dubstep sensation, but, pretty serviceable. I just wish it was a bit more comprehensible, especially for people that maybe are just starting out with the elektron Digitakt, or, people like me who don't want to dig out the manual every time they use the LFO. Anyway, thanks for watching. I love you very much. Please like and subscribe. Go to my website bigumami.com where where you can find some sweet sample packs, and see you next time, yeah.